Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of The Science of Happier Work. My name is Jackson Kirches. I'm a partner at Happiness Means Business and Warrior Leader Training, where we apply the science of happiness and human flourishing to improve individual performance and organizational results. And on this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about knowing to doing and tactics for implementation. So maybe you've had this experience, right? It's maybe January 10th or so, and you've got a couple books that you purchased, and they've been sitting on your nightstand, and now they've got a nice little layer of dust on them at this point, and you've made it about a third of the way through. And you had your new gym clothes and this gym membership that went 2 or 3 times, and now you're starting to get a little annoyed because you're paying $40 a month for this gym membership and you haven't really been going. And now there's a little bit more after that first week, some junk food starting to accumulate. And so despite having set out these New Year's resolutions of reading more, of exercising more, of eating healthier, it's 10 days into the new year and things are maybe not going quite so well. Right? Maybe you can relate to that. I certainly can. And at the same time, you'd be thinking your organization or your team saying, we're going to change how we do things a little bit, or we're going to have fewer meetings, or we're going to focus more on development. And we actually really want to start to change things up a little bit in terms of like work-life balance and improving the culture of our team or of our organization. And then maybe 2 to 3 months go by and you sort of look around and you get so caught up on a bunch of stuff and you think, oh, whoa, we haven't really done anything about the culture or work-life balance or changing how we do things, have we? So this is a fairly universal experience. And there's actually a professor and researcher, Laurie Santos at Yale University, who teaches one of the most popular courses on happiness and well-being in the entire world. I think it's got like 4.5 million students at this point. And early on in the course, she talks about something called the G.I. Joe fallacy. The G.I. Joe fallacy, meaning if you know the cartoon G.I. Joe, the main character always used to say, knowing is half the battle. And what Laurie Santos says is knowing is not half the battle. If knowing were half the battle, we'd all have six-pack abs, we'd be millionaires, we'd be reading 10 books a year, we'd have amazing work-life balance. It's not always the case. Knowing is more like maybe 5 to 10% of the battle. The real challenge is how to get oneself to do the things that you say you want to do. And simultaneously in an organization, how do we actually implement or get the organization to follow through on the intentions that we set out for the organization? And it turns out there's a bit of a science to this. And so that's what you'll get in this episode. Try to give some practical tools, again, tactics and tools for implementation. How do we go from knowing to actually doing? And we'll talk through this both in the context of individual and sort of personal or professional as well, but kind of that individual unit, as well as in the context of teams or organizations. So I want to begin with something that applies to both sides of this, to individuals and organizations. And it's a model of behavior change. And I call it the positive loop or the positive spiral. And it has to do with something in psychology that's grounded in self-efficacy theory. Now, self-efficacy is essentially one's capacity or ability to do the things that they say they're going to do. So if I say, what, I'm the type of person that I can get up at 6 a.m. every day and study for 2 hours, right? At the beginning of that, my self-efficacy may not be very high because I haven't really proven to myself that I can follow through on that. But if I do it for a week straight, I've started to build more self-efficacy. I do it for 2 months straight or a year straight, and now my self-efficacy is really high. And importantly, self-efficacy can be context dependent like that, but it also can apply more broadly. If I'm the type of person that can get up at 6 a.m. every day, let's say consistently and not hit snooze, it's likely that I'm also going to be the type of person that can stick to the schedule and learn to play a musical instrument, hypothetically, right? Because I've trained that capacity to follow through on the behaviors that I set an intention to do. So when we're thinking about implementation or behavior change, I was actually talking last week with one of my friends who's a professor at the University of Alabama. You're talking about how can I support my students to be at their best? He said, frankly, this younger generation of students is the worst I've ever seen, and not in a way of like them being bad people or not motivated, but in terms of like their overall functioning and their mental health and their performance. And I said, well, my hunch is I would start with trying to bolster self-efficacy. So again, challenging them to do some small thing, and then that proves to them that they can do it. And then they start to build that capacity to have more control and intention around their behaviors. And so where the spiral effect comes in is, let's say, okay, I want to implement a new behavior. I want to change something. I want to become happier. I want to improve my performance. I want to improve my work-life balance, etc. In the beginning, you don't have much self-efficacy, but you may just set an intention. So what happens is you say, I'm going to do X. I'm going to do something, some behavior that proves to me that I am making progress in that direction. And then you do some small thing. And then that in turn increases your self-efficacy and reinforces your intention. And then you go back to do it again. And you do it again. And that further increases self-efficacy and intention and certainty that you are capable of doing the thing you set out to do. And then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. And that's where you get this spiraling or compounding effect, where once you create some small win or some evidence to show yourself that you can do that new behavior, it bolsters your efficacy and your confidence and renews your intention to then repeat it and reinvest in it. And then that bolsters your intention and reinforces you. And then you get that spiral effect. And what's more is you can look at something called, I call them domino habits. There's an author, Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit, who references a lot of really good research literature to create that sort of more popular science book. He talks about keystone habits, this idea that these things also create ripple effects. So I'm going to say, all right, I'm setting a new habit that I want to go to bed earlier. Okay, great. So I go to bed at 9 o'clock, and you know that bolsters my self-efficacy, and I'm more able to follow through on it. But there are these other domino effects. So for instance, because I started to go to bed earlier and get a full night's sleep, I feel more alert the next day. And then so my performance at work picks up. What's more, because I'm going to bed earlier, don't have as much time to go out and drink, let's say. And so my sleep's better and my physical energy is better. Excuse me. And then the next day, right, my performance, my physical energy, my cognitive energy are better because I'm more well rested and I haven't been drinking. And so then my work performance is much better and I feel even more confident in myself. And then, maybe at the end of the day, I say, well, I'm feeling so good and I had such a good day at work. I'm going to go get a quick workout in. Or, I feel so good still and I'm not worn out. I'm going to spend 30 minutes reading this book that I've wanted to get to. And so what started as simply going to bed earlier had these domino ripple effects into changes in exercise, maybe changes in work performance and job satisfaction, changes in cognitive dimension of, more time for learning, et cetera. Right? It creates those rippling effects. And Charles Duhigg in his book references this as a keystone habit, that when you develop a new keystone habit that has these wide-ranging ripple effects, it can be incredibly transformative. Another example is people who start exercising, then you say, oh, well, I worked out the last couple of days, so I think I don't want to eat that junk food. I want to eat a little healthier. And then you say, well, now that I ate healthy and I worked out, the last thing I want to do is drink a bunch tonight. And then you sleep better. And so you see exercise there compounding into diet, substance, and sleep health changes as well. So this is this initial idea, right? When we're thinking about where do I start if I want to change or something, it's really trying to bolster self-efficacy initially. And I love the language that author James Clear uses. He says, you need to choose the type of person you want to become and prove it to yourself with small wins. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. I'll repeat that. Choose the type of person you want to become, prove it to yourself with small wins. So you want to say, I am a healthy person. I am a whatever person, I'm a consistent person, I'm a disciplined person, whatever relates to your habit or thing you're trying to implement. And then you prove it to yourself with small wins, accumulating and compounding that momentum until your self-efficacy is so strong that it's almost automatic for me. In my case, it's like meditation. I've probably done 2,000 hours over the last 5 years. And so I know every morning I'm going to do my 20 minutes. It's not that hard because that self-efficacy is there and it's been wired. So that's where you start as an individual. And I'll talk a little bit more then about how you actually stick with that. And I would posit that a similar pattern exists for organizations. As an organization, you want to have metrics in place as well as sharing stories that show that you are the type of organization that you want to become. An example of this I'll share is from a acquaintance of mine who was the president of a very large university, 30,000 some students, another 30,000 or so staff, and he led a massive cultural transformation of that university over about 20 years. And he said, what I would do is I would just find these stories that kind of illustrated what is expected of people personally and what is the benefit to them personally of creating the type of organization that we want. And then we have a simple 1 or 2 sentence mission statement, something to the effect of, we will be a standard of excellence in academia and student experience. And then I find these stories where individuals in the organization proved that we were embodying that identity. And then I would just tell them everywhere, for every conference or meeting I'd go to, I'd talk about, hey, there was this group of staff that had a student who was dealing with, I think it was cancer or some sort of chronic illness. And they renovated a new dorm room and filled it full of groceries and bedding and all those things. And they invited that student's family to come visit at no cost so that they could be with him while he received treatment. They said, oh, that's amazing. That embodies everything we want in terms of customer service, servant leadership, organizational citizenship, going above and beyond to serve the organization, the standard of excellence. And what happens there is other people in the organization see proof that the organization is becoming that way, and they see themselves in the story, and you start to create, again, that same self-efficacy spiral, but in the context of an organization. So hopefully now that gives you a little just baseline model of how to think about kind of implementation, behavior change, individual, organizational. And I'm going to give you a little bit more detail now on the individual level first of some principles you can keep in mind to stick to things. So the simple model I come up with, there's a few rules here, and I'll explain each one of them in turn. Number 1, make it count. Number 2, make it so easy you never miss. Number 3, make a plan. Number 4, change your environment. And number 5, create accountability through tracking, rewards, and support. Make it count. There's another quote I love that says, behavior that is incongruent with the identity will not last. Behavior that is incongruent with the identity will not last. So here's an example of this. I remember kind of mini coaching my friend in college he was a really great top tier nationally ranked swimmer in high school. And in college, he was having trouble getting in shape, or staying in shape, I should say. Kind of didn't have the best diet, drank a lot of beer, college things, didn't work out. And he was telling me, I can't seem to get myself to do it. And I'm like, well, this is so weird considering that as a swimmer in high school, which, sidebar here, high school swimmers, some of the craziest athletes ever. I mean, you start school at 7 in the morning and they're getting up and jumping into a freezing cold pool at 4:35 in the morning. I'm like, you did that every day. And now you're saying you can't go to the gym 2 or 3 days a week? And when I started to talk through with him, and he said, well, I need to lose weight. That's kind of how he talked about it. I need to lose weight. I need to get in shape. And he's like, so, how do you see yourself now? And what we started to get at is he's just like, I'm a college kid. I'm a college student, and I want to be a consultant, and I have a career plan, but it's like, I'm a college student. I want to get in shape. It's like, well, how did you see yourself in high school? Well, clearly in high school, you saw yourself as an athlete. And so for a college student who wants to get in better shape, it's kind of easy to miss workout. It's sort of a negotiable, if I have time, I'll get to it. But as an elite athlete in high school swim sport, that's not really an option. It's a non-negotiable. It's like, yeah, you just go, you work out every day, you get in the pool. And there's more to it than just simply statements of identity or this concept, and which we'll talk about. But initially, you can see that that behavior wasn't necessarily congruent. If you really see yourself in this context as just I'm a college kid who needs to get in shape, it's going to be hard to develop a fairly consistent exercise habit around that. But if you see yourself as an athlete, then of course it's a non-negotiable that you would exercise consistently. So I always start with making it count means tying it to your identity. Who is the type of person, or who are the type of people that you want to be? And what are the consequences if you do or don't do it? Now, neuroscientist Andrew Huberman has a really good podcast on goal setting and goal pursuit, and he has an interesting review of the literature on this. He says if you're already kind of motivated to do something, you should visualize how you will feel and what the consequences will be once you have completed the task. So I'll just use my friend's example of his is, hey, I want to start doing a swim workout for 45 minutes a couple days a week. Visualizing at the end of that 45 minutes, you're going to, get dried off and you're just going to feel invigorated, refreshed, like an athlete, like I'm ready to go. I feel great. So if you already have some motivation, you use positive visualization. If you have no motivation, you don't even want to think about doing it. Interestingly, that seems to be that the literature supports negative visualization, which would mean what's at stake if you don't do the thing. So you start to visualize, well, what would happen if I didn't do my 3 45-minute swim workouts each week? Well, man, I'm not going to feel as good about myself. I'm not going to feel very energized. You start to get a little bit of that freshman 15 going on. And yeah, I just not going to I'm not going to be at my best. And maybe my girlfriend's even going to start to say, hey man, what's going on in the midsection there, right? So you don't want to be maybe too aggressive with yourself. But this goes back to this big picture theme of making it count. So you're starting with tying it to your identity and what's personally significant to you. Is it you want to be a healthy, happy person for your family or for the team you lead or for some bigger mission you want to have? And then importantly, what are the consequences? What's at stake if you do and if you don't? So giving really strong, personally compelling, emotionally grounded reasons for the behavior. Okay, so that's starting. And I'll give you just one personal example. Let's say, so mine might be say, I want to read more. I enjoy reading nonfiction or fiction, whatever. And you would say, well, why is that important? How does that relate to your identity? Well, it's really about, I want to be an intellectually well-rounded person. And I'm truly passionate about whatever subject matter maybe that is that you want to learn about, about being my best. And I want to have a great quality of life, not only for myself, but so that I can be a resource for friends and family and colleagues. And then what are the consequences if you do? Well, if I do, I'm going to be much smarter and I'm probably going to excel in my career. I might even make a little bit more money. I may be able to start a side project. And the consequences if I don't, I'm just going to be stuck where I am. I'm not going to get any new ideas. How am I going to grow personally if I'm not getting any new inputs? Right? I'm just going to sort of wallow and fester. So again, you took something that maybe isn't necessarily that emotional and significant, but tied it to some significance there. So making it count. Next one, make it so easy you never miss. Really, this goes back to what I said earlier about you want to kind of gather proof or evidence for yourself that you can consistently do the behavior. So I think a lot of people mess this up because they think, I want to start getting up a little earlier. So they say, I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. every single day. And after 2 days, you're exhausted and you just say, screw it. You hit snooze and end up sleeping in 3 hours later, and you just get totally derailed. What I would recommend is trying to scale that down to the smallest version possible. Because when you think about how habits are formed, it's not so much the total duration as much as the amount of repetitions. So what I mean by that is if you were to think about, I want to maybe get in the habit of being more grateful. You could spend 20 minutes one day just listing all the things you're grateful for and doing this big meditation and gratitude. Or you could 2 minutes a day for a month, go in and think, okay, I'm grateful for these 5 things today. And I really feel grateful. Okay. So in the first example, right, then maybe that's not a perfect one because that was only 20 minutes. But let's say you did 3 of those 20-minute sessions for 60 minutes. You would essentially have 3 iterations or 3 repetitions of that habit. Whereas if you did 2 minutes a day for 30 days, that is the same total amount of time because we said 3 20-minute sessions versus 30 2-minute sessions, but you've done 30 iterations of 30 rounds, so to speak, or repetitions of reinforcing that habit. So you want to make it so easy that you never miss. Basically, rig the game so that you can win it. And as you do that, you're building up that momentum, which is that sense of self-efficacy, which is at the core of all of this. So I would recommend thinking about what is the minimum effective dose. So if I want to exercise 4 days a week, maybe that becomes 4 days a week. I need to set foot in the gym in my exercise clothes. And even if you do, you're running late and it's a crazy day and you literally step on the treadmill for 2 minutes and you're done, you still hit that repetition. Maybe reading more books becomes something very tangible. If I'm going to read 1 page per day, you start to get the idea. Saving money could be, I'm going to deposit $50 a week into my savings account. Third, make a plan. This is maybe the most important one. And I think it's kind of obvious, but something most people miss. You want to almost make an appointment with yourself. When, where, how long. You can also use the format of after I blank, I will blank. And have you ever had this experience where you run into someone that you used to be friends with, or you are still friends with, but you haven't caught up with in a while, maybe, and you say, oh, we should catch up. Yeah, we got to do that, right? Yeah, let's catch up. And then what happens? You probably don't catch up. But if you ever think about going on a date with someone that maybe is now your partner or someone that you really like, you have a relationship with, what happened? You said, oh, maybe we should go on a date. And you said, yeah, we should. How about Friday at 4:00 or Saturday at 2? All that changed there is what's called implementation intention. And now this one does come straight from the literature. I don't have the reference in front of me. I think it's maybe Odinger is the last name, but I can include in the comments. They've done studies on this where they look at even health outcomes, things like a breast cancer self-examination, right, which is really essential for preventative care for breast cancer. You get one group of people in a study and you just tell them, hey, you should do this self-examination this week. And another group, hey, you should do this week, but you should also just tell me right now, when are you going to do it, where, what time? And the group that simply has that implementation intention is something like 2 to 3 times more likely to actually follow through. So this is as simple as for any behavior, right? It's so easy for all of our resolutions or things that we want to implement to say, yeah, I want to start sleeping more. I want to get better work-life balance. I want to spend more time with my friends and family. But there's no actual plan there. There's no concrete implementation to say, okay, well, how is that actually granularly going to look in behavioral terms? So that's an important part of this as well, is taking what's an outcome and getting it down into inputs, or taking a result and defining it in behavioral terms. So I want to get in better shape turns into Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5:30 p.m. I will go to the workout class at my local YMCA. I want to read more becomes I will read 1 page a day, Monday through Friday, after my morning coffee. I want to spend more time with my family and have better work-life balance becomes every Friday at 4:30 p.m., I will shut off my laptop and close out of my work email on my phone. And then Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. is a dedicated time block where I will connect with an old friend, connect with a partner, or connect with someone in my family. Right? So you're defining it in behavioral terms, and you're making appointments with yourself for when, where, and how long you will do it. Or, of course, like I said, the other framework you can use is the after I blank, I will blank. If you already have an existing habit, right? After work, I will write 1 thank you note to someone that I care about. All right, we are 3/5, I believe, of the way through. So the next few are pretty quick. Change your environment. Now, this is a somewhat underrated one, I believe, and it's absolutely essential. So in my experience, I once did, I think it was 90 days, no alcohol. no drugs of any kind, no nicotine, no caffeine, fully vegetarian, meditating about 3 to 4 hours a day. And it was actually really easy. And now, if I want to go a whole week with not even a single drop of alcohol, no caffeine, no meat, and I can't even imagine right now meditating that many hours a day, it would be darn near impossible. Well, why is it so hard now? Why was it so easy back then? Well, those 90 days I'm referring to was my time living as a Zen monk in a monastery in California. So all that changed was my environment. And when I'm talking about environment here, I mean both physical environment and your social environment, or sort of your operational context. So when we think about that time at the monastery, it's like, well, there was no meat because it was fully vegetarian. There was a wake up bell and countdown bells and all these different sounds and people going to the monastery to set time to meditate together. I couldn't get up and just walk out of there because there were 50 other people. If I wanted alcohol, I literally would have to hike over a mountain to the nearest town. And it was all really easy because I changed my environment. So removing environmental triggers, removing those external factors, or conversely, right, creating external triggers or external circumstances, whether they be physical or social, that push you into doing your desired behavior. So for any new behavior you're trying to implement, I would say, how can you change your environment to make it easier and more visible and more convenient? Or conversely, if you're thinking about, I want to stop doing something or do less of something, how can you make it harder, less accessible, etc.? And same applies for these social groups, right? So it's going to be easier to work out 2 or 3 days a week, let's say, if you sign up for these group fitness classes, maybe with a trainer or with a group of friends. It's going to be easier to eat healthy if you have fresh fruit sitting out on the counter and you stop buying candy. It's probably going to be, I mean, even something as simple as saying, oh, I want to maybe improve my work-life balance. Well, how accessible is your work email on your work devices and et cetera? Or, could you leave little sticky note reminders out that say, or a sticky note on the top of your laptop that says, hey, remember my hours that I'm logging off after 5 to the next morning, do not touch this laptop. And you have that physical reminder. So all of these things about shaping your environment to be more supportive. And again, that's both physical and social. Finally, create accountability using tracking, rewards, and support. So what gets measured gets managed. How are you tracking your consistency on this behavior that you're trying to implement? Could be a checklist, could be a Excel file that you keep track of, could be like a jar full of marbles that every day when if I read my 1 page a day, or I remember to do something small, act of kindness for a friend or family member, I put a marble in the jar. It doesn't matter. It's all about making sure the behavior is salient, which is sort of the sciencey term for top of mind. How will you reward yourself? It's nice to have some intermediate or immediate gratification around certain behaviors, because a lot of times healthier behaviors, these behaviors you're trying to implement, they have what's called a delayed gratification. And so saving money now kind of hurts a little bit, and in 10 years, I'm going to be thankful for it. Or wanting to eat a little bit healthier now is like, oh, that's kind of a pain. Doesn't taste quite so good, but I'm going to feel better later. So are there any things you can do to bring in a more immediate or intermediate sense of gratification? So that could be something to the effect of, let's say, hey, I need to start this behavior. I do need to be a little bit better about saving money. And so I'm going to try to put away every day that I would have went and spent $5 on a Starbucks coffee. I'm going to put that $5 in my piggy bank. And then maybe if you do that for 10 days straight, you get that what's now $50. And you say, okay, well, I'm going to take, I don't know, $10 of that and treat myself to a nice bottle of wine. So you can see what you're doing there is you're kind of bringing those delayed rewards, that delayed gratification forward a little bit, just enough to help keep you motivated. And I don't want to go too far into the neuroscience here. Again, referencing the work of Dr. Andrew Huberman, there's some interesting nugget here around what's called intermittent positive reinforcement, which technically speaking, if you look at the research, the literature, that we actually respond most to rewards when they are given at random intervals. So kind of a weird thing. I don't totally understand the neuroscience behind it, but it's called intermittent positive reinforcement. So that would look like this. If your reward for going to your workout is I get maybe a protein bar afterwards, it's kind of a little bit sugary or something. It would actually be that if you successfully complete the behavior, I did my 1 hour workout, you would essentially flip a coin. And if it's heads, you get the protein bar. If it's tails, you don't. And that random element, it's the same psychological mechanism that's actually used in casino finance or casino like slot machines to make the behavior more addictive. That's something about that sort of element of randomness in the reward for doing the behavior helps get us a little bit more engaged in terms of our dopamine and our dopaminergic circuits in the brain that govern motivation. So a little bit nerdy tangent there, but it's interesting. And then the final one, again, is the social is support. So, can you get a battle buddy and accountability partner? Again, I use the analogy of saying, if you're going to say, hey, I want to improve my work-life balance, and you have someone at work who can check in with you and say, hey, you're not online, are you? And you can check in with them and say, hey, it's after 6 o'clock. You're not online, are you? Or maybe you both say, you know what, hey, we need to take a little break in the middle of the day because we just get super stressed out. Let's meet for 30 minutes and do a coffee chat or a short walk around the block. Having that extra person can be another layer of accountability. And you want to be careful with this a little bit because they've done, some of the literature suggests that just telling people you're going to do something is counterproductive. So if you say, hey, I'm going to go do this thing or I'm going to start this, it can actually almost give you this false reward of feeling like you've already started doing the thing when you haven't actually done it. But I think strategically using them more for accountability and saying, hey, will you hold me to this? Or we're going to meet at this time to kind of lock yourself into it is a helpful tactic. So there you have it. You just got a lot of information for this on the individual level. So we said to rehash, make it count. Tie it to your identity and create actual, tangible, emotionally compelling reasons for what's at stake. Visualizing positively, if you feel some motivation, what is the benefit of doing this? And visualizing negatively, if you're feeling no motivation, what will I lose? Or what are the consequences of not doing it? Then make it so easy you never miss. Rig the game to win it so that you can create that spiral, positive spiral of self-efficacy and momentum. Make a plan. Right? Implementation intention. When are you going to do it? Where? For how long? Or after blank behavior, I will insert new behavior. Adding it to your calendars and the like, right? Defining it in behavioral terms. So again, I will improve my work-life balance becomes I will take a 15-minute break every 2 hours to cognitively recharge, and I will disconnect from my work computer's Wi-Fi at 6 p.m. Monday through Friday. And then change your environment, right? So how can you change your external environment and your social environment to support the new behavior or to make the old behavior less accessible? And then create accountability through tracking systems, something simple and salient, rewards. So bringing in some intermediate or immediate rewards, and then social support. So maybe I'll just fly through one very quick example. Again, let's say that I want to read more. So I already shared at the beginning why that's something personal and how I can make it count, make it so easy you never miss. Well, I'm going to say I'm going to read, let's say I'm not more of a one-page guy. I'm going to say let's read for 10 minutes Monday through Friday. Okay, that's easy enough that I think you could never miss that. Make a plan. Well, when am I going to do it? Well, I think I could do it right after breakfast, which is about 8:15. And I already said 10 minutes. And then I'll add that little reminder into my calendar around the time I eat breakfast. That's just like a Google task that says read 10 minutes. Change your environment. Well, this is actually a related one. So in one way, I'm changing my cognitive environment by adding that little reminder in there. And then this sounds a little crazy, but it would actually probably be effective, is I'm going to take whatever book I'm working on and I'm actually leave it in my refrigerator because I know that I have to go into my refrigerator to get breakfast. And so sitting right in front of where my breakfast stuff is, and my eggs or whatever, there's my book. Create accountability. So how will you track this? Well, I think just having that task once again in the Google Calendar, I can mark it complete every time I do it. And if I don't, it'll carry into the next day and I'll start to see, oh, there's 3 of them stacking up, which means that I missed 2 or 3 days. How will you reward yourself? Well, let's say that after I complete this first book, I'm going to treat myself to a steak dinner because I earned it. So maybe that'll be if I'm reading 10 minutes a day, something like a month or 2 from now, but I get my steak dinner. And then from who we get support, can you add accountability? Well, maybe, yeah, I can talk to my friend Lewis, who, like me, is very neurotic and type A and is always working on habits. And I can say, hey, Lewis, if I don't do this consistently, maybe there's some punishment we can come up with. I'll send you $50. So right there, again, you just took something rather ambiguous. I want to read more. Do you know exactly what is at stake? In behavioral terms, what is expected of you when you have a tracking system in place, and you're really going to have to fight like hell to not read more. And that's ultimately what all of this is about, is sort of rigging the game so that you can win it. And once you hit 10 minutes a day consistently, it's probably going to be a little bit easier to read more and more and more and have that spiral into other areas. So having run through that on the individual level, I'll talk a little bit about some organizational applications. And I will be the first to admit that it's probably not quite as simple and elegant when you think about this in the context of an organization, but there are still some models you can use. And I'm actually going to pull up in front of me right now this model that I think is helpful from McKinsey consulting firm. And let's tie back, though, to the same principles that I said. So we already talked a little bit about how the same spiral of self-efficacy can apply to an organization. Whereas an organization, you craft a very strategic, short, concise, tangible vision and or mission statement about the type of thing you're trying to do. Same thing, you can do it for your team. But then you do want to have some conversations with stakeholders about, well, what is at stake? Why is this significant? Is this actually aligned with the organization's priorities? Because in my experience now, working with one particularly large and complex organization and the part of the National Guard, if there's not alignment there and there's not people at the top of the organization or at the team level who are bought in, nothing really is going to happen. You need these people who are motivated to buy in and kind of push it along and think about, well, what are the consequences for individuals, teams, and the organization if we don't get this right? So again, starting to make it easy. Well, are there small behaviors that you can begin to implement? You don't have to do this big organizational change. I remember my business partner, Paul, who's done some of this work in the past, he had a simple intervention once with, I believe it was a Canadian prison that was struggling with culture and retention issues. That was as simple as each person in management gets one accountability partner, so they're buddied up. And each day they are to send one thank you email that's truly witnessing and recognizing someone else's contribution for something they did. And they were supposed to blind copy their accountability partner so that they would know if, hey, you forgot to do yours today, or it's been 5 days and you haven't done it, what's going on? And what he found is creating that, something so easy, right? It's literally a 2-minute thank you email, is priming on the individual level people to start looking for what's going right, to recognize and communicate their gratitude, which is actually an essential part of psychological flourishing at work because it relates to our psychological needs for mastery and contribution. And you're creating some fairly large ripple effects there with something that's so easy that really anyone can do it. So I would encourage you, if you're thinking about this for your team, what are some very small interventions you can do? And then, of course, making a plan. How can you set that up? How can you create organizational triggers to do it? And it could be something as simple as when I did work back at a fairly large company in management. I ran a $1.6 million business unit with 16 people under me. And, we created this flow that was essentially like a positive affirmation Slack flow. So the idea was you have this Slack set up where you can submit a representative's name, their team, and what they did, and it would log all that. And then we, at the end of each month or each quarter, would kind of look through that and we would see, oh, how did this representative get recognized? Did this one? And then we would also look at how often is Jackson tangibly recognizing these people? And what happened is the first couple of months we set it up, I would notice, oh, there's 16 people on my team and I only submitted 8 positive affirmations this month. I may need to work on that. And then the next month, what happens? I get to like 15. And then you start to build this out into a new habit where you're consistently giving positive affirmations. And so you may also hear now, apparently they're doing maintenance outside. So that's not great timing. But let's fly through these at an organizational level. So that's making a plan, right? Setting up systems to kind of make it accountable. That also relates to changing the environment. If you're working in a physical environment, how can you make that changes in behavior more readily available or obvious? And then accountability, tracking, and social support are, of course, essential. So this means getting maybe peer-to-peer support, as well as bringing in a next level manager, an NLM. That is absolutely essential for changing behavior. Tracking, right? That's all about performance management. So is performance management aligned with the type of change or the type of behaviors you want to implement? And then rewards and incentive structures is a huge one. If you're trying to cultivate maybe increased emotional intelligence or psychological safety, as well as improved customer service in your, let's say, customer service center, right? Your call center or whatever, email account support, etc. And at the same time, you pay people a bonus if they handle this many client interactions or client tickets per month. Well, your incentives aren't aligned because you're saying you're trying to prioritize great customer experience, but you're incentivizing people to get through as many of them as quickly as they can. So there's a lack of alignment there. So I'll also give here the 4S model from McKinsey, which is a condensed version of what I just talked about. And they say, I will change my behavior if. There's 4 parts to this. And now that I'm looking at it, I don't know why they call it the 4S model, because there's not necessarily S's, but that's fine. Say fostering and understanding and conviction. So that's what I said at the outset here, right? If you have to have a compelling why for the organization, where both the organizational level, team level, and individual level, people have an understanding of what is being asked of them and why it makes sense. Reinforcing with formal mechanisms. That gets to a lot of what I just said about making a plan and changing environment and adding an accountability. So there should be structures, processes, and systems, technology, software, etc., performance management structure that reinforces the type of change you want to make. Developing talent and skills, right? People need to have the ability to actually do the things that are being asked of them. And then finally, role modeling, which I didn't necessarily talk about in mine, but in the organizational context, really is essential that leaders need to embody the type of change that's being asked of them. So let me give you an example of how we kind of put this all together for a massive cultural transformation we did that was focused on improving safety outcomes. So we're working with a very large, maybe the nation's largest produce hauler, and make it count. Why is this important? Well, this one thankfully was pretty easy because it's safety. It's a matter of life and death. And their insurance claims were so out of line that they were about to go bankrupt, or not go bankrupt, excuse me, but they were going to have to dissolve the company and reform a new company so that they could get new insurance. So making it count. Well, we communicated all that to leaders saying, hey, this is the 6, probably 7-figure consequence of not changing your safety outcomes. Then how can we make it easy? Well, we started to try to design things into the environment, into their daily flows that would make it a little easier. So, changing how people communicate to be more safety focused, encouraging supervisors to simply ask questions about safety more regularly so that it wasn't just every day this old sermon of, hey, you got to be safe, you got to be safe. We started to implement these small changes, and then we began to encourage them to make plans around that. And I'm kind of grouping these together about making it easy, changing environment, making a plan. We also taught them new safety processes. And so we had one of our external experts come in and audit, how are their trailers work? How does their shop work? Are there any processes of how you take things in and get them out that need to be changed in order to be a safer workplace? When you think about how leadership communicates, once again, and their incentives, it's like, well, are you paying purely based on the amount of loads transported, or are you really, really aggressively focusing on, hey, how many loads did we haul today, at the expense of saying, hey, did we do it safely? And this relates back to the McKinsey model of role modeling and skill development. We also taught and coached their leaders on how to have more effective communications around that. So instead of going up to someone and saying, "Hey, you're not wearing your safety vest, you're in trouble," I'd say, "Hey, I noticed you don't have this vest on, and we want to make sure you're getting home safe to your family. Does your vest fit? Did you just forget it? What's going on? We want to make sure that we're supporting you to do things right." So at all levels, we started to build in some of those small process changes around how people communicate, the physical workspaces, even adding different elements to the trucks or adding a checklist that when people get into the trucks, you have it right there of saying, "Hey, you need to check this, you check this, you check this," then you sign off and confirm. And so these small, various incremental changes to environment and processes all started to have this shift. And then, of course, accountability and tracking, right? We set up weekly group coaching calls where people could share stories about what was going right, as well as talk through obstacles. So again, you're directing the focus of the organization back to this again and again. We had them closely monitoring insurance claims year over year to see how the change was going and how much money they were saving. And then, of course, rewards. You had people at all levels getting changes in rewards and rewarding good behavior, safe behavior, etc. Even the owner of the company through some picnic family outing thing because they had a really good, successful period of the season. And so you start to see how that shifts a little bit. So that last example I gave is maybe not quite as tangible as the individual example, because if you've ever been around change management in an organization, and now having done it for a couple, including the military, it is really messy and not quite as specific as saying, well, just read your 10 minutes a day after breakfast each day and everything goes. But my hope is that you can start to see how these rules apply, all of them being about this idea of you need to make the change as easy as possible for yourself or for the people or the organization that's being asked to change. Set yourself up to start accumulating small wins and small proof of concept and momentum, bolstering efficacy, and then watching that spiral or compound into wider, more consistent change. So there you have it. This was a very in-depth episode, more than I thought it would be. But I hope you got some good information there on how to change, because change is really hard. It's all about going from knowing to doing, using both some science-based tools, we touched on a few references, as well as practical business tools that you can use and begin to implement for yourself, for your team, or for your organization. So you can join me next month for more on the science of happier work. Again, we'll talk about both personal and organizational applications to be at your best in work and life. So that's all for now, and I'll talk to you next time.